The London Enigma, a Detective Miles Harrington mystery. Chapter 1. The Call to London. The morning in New York was one of those rare instances when the city seemed to pause, to breathe in the peace it so seldom enjoyed. Detective Miles Harrington, with his back against the window of his modest apartment overlooking the East River, sipped his black coffee. The quiet was a luxury, one he knew wouldn't last long, and sure enough the shrill ring of his phone sliced through the tranquility like a sharp blade. The ID was unfamiliar, but the voice that answered was crisp, authoritative, and undeniably British Inspector Thomas from Scotland Yard. "We need you here, Harrington," Thomas said, his voice tight with urgency. "A murder, quite unique. Locked room, no signs of entry, and the victim, well, you might know him, Lord Charles Harrow." Lord Charles Harrow. The name reverberated through Harrington's mind like an echo from the past. His mentor, back when he had served briefly with Scotland Yard before returning to New York. The case was personal, and the puzzle intriguing. He agreed to take the next flight out. The rest of the morning was spent in preparation, but his thoughts were already across the Atlantic, piecing together the scant details. A man dead in his study, locked from within, no weapon, no visible escape. How? The mystery was like a magnet, pulling him towards London. As he boarded the plane, the New York skyline receded into the distance, and Harrington felt the weight of the mystery settle on him, like an old coat worn once more. He pulled out his notebook, jotting down initial thoughts and questions. The flight would be long, but his mind was already on the ground in London, sifting through shadows and secrets. The aircraft ascended into the overcast sky, and with it Harrington's mind caught on one chilling fact. Lord Harrow had not only been his mentor, but a man with secrets that could fill volumes. Now he was dead, leaving behind a riddle wrapped in a mystery. And Harrington knew this was more than just another case. It was a call to arms against the shadows of his past. He remembered the last time he'd seen Lord Harrow, the man's piercing gaze, the subtle hint of danger in his smile as they discussed the darker sides of London's high society. Harrington had left Scotland Yard, partly because of the murky waters Harrow seemed to navigate with ease. Now those waters had claimed him, and Harrington felt a personal obligation to dive back in, to find the truth amidst the lies. The plane journey was a time of reflection, of piecing together what he knew of Harrow, of the London he had known, and of the Scotland Yard he once served. He considered the locked room mystery, an old trope in detective fiction, but rarely seen in real life. What could it mean? Was it a message, a challenge, or merely a misdirection? As the plane descended into Heathrow, Harrington felt the familiar pull of London, its layers of history and secrets. The city awaited him, not just with open arms, but with a puzzle that demanded his full attention. He knew from experience that London was a city where the past was never truly past, where the echoes of old crimes could intertwine with new ones, creating a symphony of intrigue that only a seasoned detective like him could hope to conduct. End of chapter. Chapter 2. Arrival at Scotland Yard. The plane touched down under the grey, welcoming sky of London, a city that had seen Harrington in his younger days, when his hair was still dark and his eyes less weary. A car from Scotland Yard was waiting, its driver a silent, stern-faced man who drove through the city's arteries towards New Scotland Yard. The building loomed over them, an imposing structure that whispered secrets of countless cases, both solved and unsolved. Inspector Thomas met him at the entrance, his handshake firm, his eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. They walked through corridors lined with portraits of past detectives, their painted eyes seeming to follow Harrington, perhaps judging his readiness for this case. In Thomas's office, cluttered with files and photos of the crime scene, Harrington studied the evidence. Lord Harrow found in his study a single bullet in his forehead, the room locked, the key still in the door from inside. The window was sealed, no signs of tampering. Yet no gun was found, no trace of a struggle, just the silent accusation of the locked door. Among the photographs, one caught Harrington's eye, a painting, a landscape, but it seemed strangely out of place, almost as if it were a message or a key to another door. The brush strokes, the colors, everything about it suggested it was more than mere decoration. "That painting," Harrington pointed at the photo, his voice low. "It's not just art, it's a clue." Thomas looked at him, puzzled yet intrigued, as they prepared to delve deeper into the enigma of Lord Harrow's death. The case was not just about solving a murder, it was about uncovering the layers of life Lord Harrow had led, the secrets he had kept, and the enemies he had made. Thomas briefed him on the initial findings. No signs of forced entry, no weapon, and the room meticulously locked from the inside. The evidence suggested someone with intimate knowledge of the estate, perhaps even someone from within. They discussed the possible methods of murder: a hidden passage, a mechanical device, or perhaps a third party not yet considered. Harrington's mind, trained by years of solving the unsolvable, began to weave through the possibilities. He thought about the locked room cases he'd read about, the classic detective stories. But this was real life, where human motives, greed, and revenge played out in dangerous, often unpredictable ways. They reviewed the list of people who had access to the estate, the staff, family, and known associates of Lord Harrow. Each name was a potential suspect, each with a motive that could be as simple as jealousy or as complex as being part of the same shadowy dealings Harrow was known for. As they left the office, heading towards the crime scene, Harrington felt the weight of history and expectation. This wasn't just another case. It was a convergence of his past with Scotland Yard, his mentor's legacy, and the dark underbelly of London society. The painting, the locked room, the bullet in Harrow's forehead, all pointed to a mystery that was both personal and professional, urging him to dig deep into the city's soul to find the truth. End of chapter. Chapter 3. The Harrow Estate. The drive to the Harrow Estate was through winding lanes, the autumn leaves painting the path in shades of gold and red, a stark contrast to the dark purpose of their visit. The estate was grand, a testament to old money and secrets behind every door. The mansion stood like a sentinel guarding its mysteries. Harrington and Thomas were greeted by a somber staff, each member with their own story, their own secrets. They interviewed everyone, Lady Harrow, elegant but with a sadness in her eyes that spoke volumes. The butler, Mr. Carver, whose hands shook slightly as he spoke, possibly from guilt or fear. The gardener, whose boots were too clean for someone who worked the earth, and the maid, whose eyes darted too often to the corridor leading to the study, as if expecting someone or something to emerge. Inside the study, the scene was preserved meticulously. The body removed, but the atmosphere still heavy with death. Harrington felt the weight of history in the room, the walls lined with books, the desk cluttered with papers. The room was a testament to a life lived both in the light and in the shadows. Behind the painting, Harrington found a hidden compartment, revealing letters that spoke of blackmail, of threats, of a life lived under a shadow. The letters were a maze of names, dates, and cryptic messages. One name in particular jumped out at Harrington, a name from his past, suggesting that this murder was but a piece of a much larger, darker puzzle. The implications were clear. Lord Harrow's death was the tip of an iceberg of corruption, and Harrington knew this case would lead him through the labyrinth of high society and into the depths of conspiracy. The investigation into Lord Harrow's life revealed a man who was both admired and feared, a collector of secrets, and now those secrets were spilling out, painting a picture of a man who had danced with danger one too many times. Each piece of evidence, each statement from the staff, added layers to the story, but none provided clarity on the killer or the method of murder in a locked room. They discussed the possibility of accomplices, of hidden alliances within the household or beyond. The staff's reactions varied from genuine shock to calculated composure, making it hard to discern who might be hiding something more sinister. Harrington examined the study further, noting the placement of furniture, the lack of disturbance in the room, and the peculiar absence of any weapon. The key in the door from the inside suggested either a suicide or an incredibly clever murder. But the bullet's trajectory and the nature of the wounds ruled out suicide, leaving them with a paradox. As they continued their search, Harrington couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the estate itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. The day turned into night, and with it, the storm outside grew, echoing the turmoil within. The mystery was not just in the room where Lord Harrow died, but in the very fabric of the lives intertwined with his. The estate felt like a character in this drama, its walls whispering secrets, its shadows moving with a life of their own. Harrington knew that to solve this case, he would need to understand not just the people but the place, the history, and the hidden corridors of power that Lord Harrow had navigated. The investigation was more than just a hunt for a killer. It was an excavation into the soul of a man, his ambitions, his sins, and the legacy he left behind. End of chapter. Chapter 4, The Locked Room Mystery. The investigation into the mechanics of the locked room began in earnest. How could someone commit murder, leave no trace, and lock the door from the inside? Harrington's mind was a whirlwind of theories, hidden passages, mechanical tricks, or perhaps an accomplice outside. They scoured the room every inch looking for anomalies. The old blueprint of the estate revealed a now sealed fireplace, possibly a secret passage, but upon inspection it was solidly bricked up. The room was a fortress, designed to keep secrets in as much as it kept intruders out. Harrington pondered over the physics of the scenario, discussing with Thomas the possibilities of a self-inflicted wound, though the evidence contradicted this. The bullet's trajectory, the lack of gunpowder residue, everything pointed away from suicide. The day stretched into night, the study illuminated only by the occasional flash of lightning from the storm brewing outside. The atmosphere was charged, not just with the storm, but with the sense that they were being watched. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound was amplified, creating an environment where the rational and the eerie blurred. That night, as thunder clapped above, Harrington murmured to himself, "What if the room wasn't locked at all?" His words hung in the air, a challenge to the very nature of the mystery they were embroiled in. If the room wasn't locked, then the killer must have had another way out, or perhaps the key to this puzzle lay not in the physical, but in the perception of what locking meant. They decided to re-examine every piece of evidence, every witness statement, with this new perspective. The locked room was no longer just a physical barrier, but a metaphor for the secrets Lord Harrow had kept. Each clue, each testimony was re-evaluated to see if they had been looking at the problem from the wrong angle. The locked room was the heart of the mystery, and now it seemed to be beating with a life of its own, leading them down paths they hadn't considered before. Harrington began to consider psychological aspects. Could the killer have manipulated the perception of the room being locked? Maybe through misdirection, or by creating a false narrative. He thought about the possibility of a double bluff, where the killer made it look like an impossible crime to direct attention away from the simpler truth. They revisited the staff, probing deeper into their movements and alibis on the night of the murder. Each conversation added more layers to the mystery, but also revealed inconsistencies, potential lies, or truths hidden beneath layers of societal decorum. The maid spoke of seeing Lord Harrow late at night, the butler mentioned a mysterious visitor, and the gardener, who claimed to have seen nothing, was perhaps too quick to dismiss his observations. These discrepancies could be the key to unlocking not just the room, but the entire case. Harrington's approach was methodical, piecing together the puzzles of human behavior, the physics of the crime scene, and the psychology of deception. He knew that solving this case would require not just detective work, but a deep dive into the psyche of everyone involved, including his own. As they continued their investigation, the storm outside mirrored the turmoil within Harrington's thoughts. The rain beat against the windows, the wind howled through the old estate, and somewhere in this tempest, the truth was waiting to be uncovered. The locked room was not just about the mechanics of a door, but about the chambers of secrets within each person, connected to this case. The question was not only how the room was locked, but why it was made to appear so, and in that question lay the path to the killer. End of chapter. Chapter 5. Shadows and Suspects. The next day, Harrington pieced together Lord Harrow's last movements, talking to those who had seen him or interacted with him in his final hours. Each conversation unraveled more about the man and the life he led, full of contradictions and hidden depths. Lady Harrow spoke of her husband's secretive nature, hinting at a life he kept from her, a life of shadows and deals. Her grief was palpable, but so was her resentment towards the man she once loved. She mentioned his recent behavior had grown more erratic, more secretive, as if he knew something was coming. Her words painted a picture of a man living under the weight of his own secrets, perhaps even his own doom. The gardener, a man of few words, mentioned seeing someone unusual around the estate, but his description was vague, nothing more than a silhouette against the dusk. His boots, still too clean for one who worked the soil, suggested he might have been more observant or involved than he let on. The maid, young and nervous, mentioned overhearing an argument the night before the murder, but couldn't identify the voices, only the tone angry, desperate. She spoke of Lord Harrow's late-night visitors, men in suits who seemed to carry the weight of the world in their briefcases. A new clue emerged, a piece of fabric dark and torn found near the body suggesting a struggle, yet it matched no clothing from the household. This fabric became the focal point of their investigation, leading them to ask about any events where such attire might have been worn. The fabric was from a costume, but for what event, they wondered. Harrington realized they had overlooked a masquerade ball hosted by Lord Harrow just days before his death, where the killer could have been masquerading as someone else, in plain sight. The guest list was extensive, filled with high society politicians, and those with motives to want Lord Harrow silenced. They reviewed the security footage from that night, frames filled with masked figures, laughter and dance, but also tension. Some remembered seeing Lord Harrow arguing with someone, hidden behind a mask of a raven, a symbol of mystery or perhaps an omen. The alibi for the person in the raven costume was shaky, their identity still a mystery. The investigation now took on a new complexity, delving into the lives of every attendee of the ball, looking for connections to Harrow, for motives, for opportunities. Harrington interviewed each guest, scrutinizing their stories, their reactions. Some were forthcoming, others evasive. The masquerade had not only been a social event, but a stage for deceit, for hidden intentions. Each mask worn that night could conceal a killer, and every alibi needed to be broken down to its core. As they were about to confront this mysterious figure, a piercing scream shattered the silence of the estate. Another body had been discovered, escalating the stakes and the urgency of their investigation. This new death, another locked room with similar circumstances, suggested either a copycat or a serial killer with an intricate method. The victim was Mr. Carver, the butler, whose last actions seemed to be trying to protect or warn someone. In his hand, a note, a confession, or perhaps a clue, pointing towards someone Harrington had considered an ally. The case was no longer static. It was evolving. The killer's hand moving pieces on a board, and Harrington knew he needed to think several moves ahead. The masquerade ball, the fabric, the new murder all threads in a tapestry of deceit that was growing more intricate by the minute. The pressure was mounting. The shadows of the Harrow estate seemed to grow darker, and each suspect's story added more layers to the enigma. Harrington felt like he was walking through a maze with no clear exit, where every turn could lead to another revelation or another dead end. The investigation had become a race against time, against an unseen adversary who knew the rules of this deadly game all too well. End of chapter. Chapter 6, The Masquerade Ball. The investigation turned back to the Masquerade Ball, an event now seen in a new light. The theme of masks, anonymity, and revelry had provided the perfect camouflage for someone with murder on their mind. Harrington and Thomas reviewed the guest list, the staff, and pored over the security footage from that night. Masks had been part of the theme, making identification challenging, but one figure in particular stood out, their costume matching the fabric from the crime scene. Interviews with attendees painted a picture of a night filled with laughter, dance, but also tension. Some spoke of Lord Harrow's demeanour, how he seemed on edge, his eyes scanning the crowd as if expecting something or someone. Others recalled the raven-costumed figure, not just because of the costume's uniqueness, but because of the air of menace that seemed to cling to them like a shadow. Harrington pieced together the events of the ball, reconstructing who was where, who interacted with whom, and who had the opportunity to slip away unnoticed. The Masquerade had not just been a celebration, but a strategic battlefield where motives could be hidden, alliances formed or broken, and murder planned. The security footage was grainy at best, but it captured moments of interest. A figure in a raven mask near the study, another in a less conspicuous costume who seemed to follow Harrow's every move. They noted the times, the interactions, looking for anomalies, for patterns that could lead them to the killer. They spoke to the event organizer, who described how the costumes were distributed, how some were custom-made for guests known for their penchant for drama or secrecy. The raven mask, in particular, was a bespoke piece, commissioned by someone who had paid extra for anonymity. The investigation into the attendees revealed a web of connections, of rivalries and alliances. Some were there to curry favor, others to spy, and a few perhaps to kill. Each guest's background was scrutinized, their financial dealings, their relationships with Harrow, and their alibis for the time of the murder. One guest, a known financier with a history of shady dealings, seemed particularly elusive, his whereabouts during the crucial hours unaccounted for. Another, a socialite with a reputation for gambling and debts, had been seen arguing with Harrow earlier in the evening. The interview with the caterer revealed they had seen someone of interest, a man in a raven mask, but not the one from the photos, suggesting more than one person might have used that guise. This raised the possibility of an accomplice or a decoy, complicating the investigation further. Harrington felt the case was like a chess game, where the opponent was several moves ahead. The Masquerade had been more than just a party. It was a setup, a stage for the crime. The killer had used the anonymity to their advantage, blending into the festivities, perhaps even enjoying the irony of committing murder under the guise of celebration. As they delved deeper, a pattern emerged. The killer was meticulous, intelligent, and had an intimate knowledge of the estate and its inhabitants. The Masquerade Ball was not just a backdrop, but an integral part of the plot, a clever use of social camouflage to execute a plan that had been in motion long before the night of the ball. The investigation now stretched beyond the physical evidence to the psychological warfare of social events, where reputation, power, and secrecy intertwined. Harrington knew that solving this case would require not just forensic analysis, but an understanding of human nature, of the masks people wore in life as well as at the ball. The evening of the ball, with its laughter and music, had been a perfect cover for murder, and now the echoes of that night were leading them through a maze of human motives and hidden truths towards a killer who was playing the game with deadly seriousness. End of chapter. Chapter 7, Dark Revelations. The discovery of Mr. Carver's body in another locked room seemed to confirm their worst fears. They were dealing with a killer who was not only cunning, but perhaps part of a larger scheme. The note in Carver's hand was cryptic, yet it hinted at betrayal from within. It read, "The raven flies at midnight," with no signature, just a smear of what looked like blood. Harrington and Thomas revisited every aspect of the case with new urgency. The note suggested a coded message, possibly related to the Masquerade Ball where the raven mask had been so prominent. Was this a warning or a confession? They re-interviewed the staff, now focusing on any connections to the raven costume or any unusual behavior. The maid, now visibly shaken, admitted to seeing Lord Harrow with someone in a raven mask just before the murder, but she had dismissed it as part of the ball's festivities. Harrington's mind raced through possibilities. The raven could symbolize more than just a costume. It could be a sign of an organization or a group. He started to compile a list of known symbols and their meanings in criminal circles. The raven, often linked to mystery and death, could be a marker for something more sinister. Their investigation led them back to London's underbelly, where they sought out informants and old contacts. They learned of an underground society known as the Midnight Ravens, a group rumored to deal in blackmail and assassination, using the anonymity of masks to conduct their dark dealings. The deeper they dug, the more Harrington realized that Lord Harrow might have been entangled with this group, perhaps as a member or a victim of their machinations. The Masquerade Ball could have been a strategic meeting point, a place where Harrow was either betrayed or made an example of. With this new thread, Harrington and Thomas began to cross-reference the guest list with known associates of the Midnight Ravens. Several names matched, including a socialite whose family had deep roots in London's criminal history. As they pieced this together, another piece of the puzzle fell into place. A ledger found hidden in Lord Harrow's safe, detailing payments, dates, and initials, some of which matched the guest list from the ball. This ledger suggested Harrow was not just a victim but possibly a player in this dark game, using his position to protect or perhaps control. The night was falling, and with it a sense of foreboding. Harrington knew they were close to uncovering something vast, something that could shake the foundations of London's elite. But with every step closer to the truth, the danger increased. The killer was still at large, and with Carver's death they had shown they would strike again to protect their secrets. Harrington felt the weight of this revelation, understanding that this case was no longer just about solving a murder, but preventing a potential war within the shadows of London's high society. The next move would have to be strategic, calculated to catch a predator who thrived in the dark. End of chapter. Chapter 8, The Trap. Armed with new information, Harrington devised a plan to draw out the Midnight Ravens. He proposed hosting another event at the Harrow estate, under the guise of a memorial for Lord Harrow, but with every detail designed to bait the killer. The plan was risky, using themselves as bait, but Harrington knew it was the only way to bring the shadows into the light. They invited all the suspects from the Masquerade Ball, ensuring the theme would echo the original night, masks included. The estate was prepared. Hidden microphones and cameras were installed, with Scotland Yard officers in plain clothes blending into the crowd. Harrington and Thomas would be there, not as investigators, but as mourners, their true identities concealed by masks. The night of the memorial turned into a tense reenactment of the masquerade. Guests arrived, their faces hidden, their motives cloaked. The atmosphere was thick with pretense and danger. Harrington watched every move, every interaction, looking for the telltale signs of the killer or their accomplices. As the night progressed, a figure in a raven mask, almost identical to the one seen in the security footage from the night of the murder, appeared. This individual moved with purpose, heading towards the study where Harrow was killed. Harrington followed at a distance, his heart pounding with anticipation. Inside the study, the figure began to search, perhaps looking for something left behind or to secure their tracks. Harrington confronted them, revealing his identity. The figure, caught off guard, attempted to escape, but was quickly subdued by Thomas and the hidden officers. The mask was removed to reveal not the expected face, but someone unexpected, Lady Harrow herself. Her eyes were filled with a mix of fear and defiance. She claimed she was there to find evidence to clear her name, insisting she had been framed. Harrington, however, was not convinced. He knew this could be another layer of deception, a way to further misdirect their investigation. But as they interrogated her, her story began to unravel, revealing not her guilt, but the depth of her involvement with the Midnight Ravens. She was not the killer, but a pawn manipulated by the true mastermind. The revelation of her involvement was a shock, but it also confirmed they were on the right path. The killer was still out there, but now they had a new lead, a new understanding of the network they were up against. The night ended with more questions than answers, but Harrington felt they were closer to the truth. The trap had not caught the killer, but it had exposed a part of the conspiracy, shifting the game in their favor. Now, with Lady Harrow's cooperation, they might just turn the tables on the Midnight Ravens. End of chapter. Chapter 9. The Hidden Agenda. The interrogation of Lady Harrow provided crucial insights into the Midnight Ravens' operations. Her involvement was not by choice, but coercion. Her husband, Lord Harrow, had been deeply embedded in their activities, using his influence to protect the group while also gathering evidence against them. Lady Harrow revealed that Harrow's death was not just about silencing him, but also sending a message to others who might think of betraying the group. She had been left in the dark about much of his dealings, but she knew enough to fear for her life if she didn't comply with the Raven's demands. With this new perspective, Harrington and Thomas revisited all the evidence, focusing on the ledger and the notes left by Harrow. They deduced that Harrow was compiling a dossier, a comprehensive exposé on the Midnight Ravens, which he intended to use either as leverage or to bring down the organization. The investigation now took a more covert turn. They needed to find this dossier, which could be the key to understanding the full scope of the conspiracy. Harrow's study, the estate, and every known associate were searched again, this time with a clearer understanding of what they were looking for. A breakthrough came when they discovered a hidden safe behind one of the bookshelves, a safe that had been overlooked due to its intricate disguise. Inside, they found Harrow's dossier, a collection of documents, recordings, and photographs that painted a chilling picture of corruption, blackmail, and murder at the highest levels of society. The dossier included names, transactions, and even details of planned assassinations. Among the documents was a note from Harrow, written as if he knew his end was near, warning of a mole within Scotland Yard itself. This revelation sent a chill through Harrington. The enemy was not only outside but within their ranks. With this new evidence, Harrington knew they had to move quickly. The dossier was not just their way to solve Harrow's murder, but also to dismantle this organization before they could destroy more lives. However, with a potential mole, every step needed to be calculated, every trust questioned. They organized a meeting with Scotland Yard's highest ranks, sharing only the necessary information to avoid alerting the mole. Plans were laid to protect key witnesses, including Lady Harrow, and to secure the evidence. As night fell over London, Harrington felt the weight of the city's secrets pressing down. The game had escalated, and the stakes were now higher than ever. They were not just hunting a killer, they were poised to upend a shadow government within London's elite. End of chapter. Chapter 10, The Unveiling. The final pieces of the puzzle were coming together. With the dossier in hand, Harrington and Thomas orchestrated a sting operation, playing their cards close to the chest to flush out the mole and confront the leader of the Midnight Ravens. They staged a public event, a grand exposition of art and culture, knowing it would draw out members of the group, including their leader. The event was filled with undercover officers, the venue wired for sound and vision, ready to capture any confession or slip-up. As the evening unfolded, Harrington watched the interactions, noting who spoke to whom, who seemed too comfortable or too nervous. The tension was palpable, each guest a potential suspect or ally. The breakthrough came when they intercepted a coded message meant for the mole within Scotland Yard, revealing their identity as one of the senior officers, someone Harrington had trusted. This officer had been feeding information to the Ravens, ensuring their operations remained undetected. With this piece of information, they set the trap. The mole was arrested during the event, his shock and betrayal evident as he was led away. The arrest sent ripples through the crowd, panic setting in among the Ravens' members. Harrington then addressed the gathering, revealing the extent of the Midnight Ravens' corruption, using Harrow's dossier as undeniable proof. He named names, including those of politicians, financiers, and even law enforcement, who had been part of, or victims to, the group's machinations. The climax of the evening came when the supposed leader of the Midnight Ravens, a well-respected philanthropist and art collector, attempted to leave. Harrington intercepted him, backed by Thomas and several officers. The confrontation was tense, the room silent as the leader, Sir Reginald Ashwood, faced the accusations. Ashwood tried to maintain his composure, denying any involvement, but Harrington had one last ace up his sleeve. He played a recording from Harrow's dossier, a conversation between Ashwood and Harrow, where Ashwood clearly discussed the elimination of threats to the order, including Harrow himself. The room erupted in gasps and whispers as Ashwood's facade crumbled. He was taken into custody, his calm exterior giving way to rage and desperation. The arrest of such a high-profile figure sent shockwaves through London's elite, uncovering a network of deceit that had operated in the shadows for years. As the night drew to a close, the event turned into a scene of chaos and revelation. Witnesses came forward, some out of fear, others with relief, providing more names and details that would keep Scotland Yard busy for months, if not years. Harrington stood by the window, watching the dawn break over London, feeling the weight of the victory but also the burden of what it meant. The case of Lord Harrow's murder had solved, but the ramifications of exposing the Midnight Ravens would echo through the city's corridors of power. Thomas joined him, offering a weary but satisfied smile. "We've just scratched the surface, haven't we?" he remarked, knowing that while they had dismantled one part of the organization, the roots might extend deeper. Harrington nodded, his mind already on the next steps. "Yes, but we've shown that no one is above the law, no matter how deep their pockets or how dark their secrets." As they left the venue, Harrington received a message on his phone, a cryptic note that suggested the fight against such shadowy forces was far from over. It read, "The raven may fall, but the darkness remains." With this, Harrington knew his journey into the heart of London's mysteries was just beginning. The city, with all its layers of history and deceit, would continue to call upon him, and he would answer, ever the detective, ever the guardian against the shadows. End of chapter and end of story. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe for more free audiobooks on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.